confused.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we're pretty sure that there's nothing wrong with the pitch. India just need to learn how to play spin better. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Max Rowe Brown. How are you doing, Max Rowe Brown? Are you having a good day?
Very good. Yeah, I chose the wrong time to take a sip of coffee there.
And we've
Nearly
got
spat it everywhere.
And we've got Dan Weston on the podcast. Long time no see for me, Dan. How you doing? How you getting on?
Yeah, I'm good. I think last time I was on the pod was with Max and Ross, and it was after the second game in this series. So a bit of a theme coming on. So yeah, all good here.
How times have changed. On this episode, we will be talking about India v Australia. The third test just wrapped up. Well, I say just wrapped up about 6 a.m. UK time. We're recording this at lunch. We'll be giving our views, our hot takes, and some of our less hot, more considered takes, hopefully. Max, what happened in the cricket?
Well, Jack, in the cricket, we were treated to a test match at Indore for only the third time, I believe, after obviously the old the Dharma Salam, the nonsense that happened before. And interestingly, the pitch curators decided that they're going to go with the inverse Nigerian flag approach, which involves grass in the middle and nothing anywhere else. And funnily enough, that resulted in a pitch that was quite difficult to bat on. India batting first, skittled by Kuhneman rather than Lyon in this particular occasion, just the 109. Australia with an excellent opportunity to take a commanding lead. They took a lead. And at one point, Jack, we thought that they were going to end up succumbing with Pujara's vigil in the third innings looking like being key. But a couple of key catches turned things around, and Australia won in India by 9 wickets. And just after we'd got together, Jack, and lamented about how Australia had no hope and it was guaranteed to be 4-0, we were proven to be wrong in double quick time. And, Australia cock a hoop, India soul searching, perhaps. Where would you like to start?
I think the first thing we should start with is us to exonerate our guilt for predicting that this would be 4-0. First of all, I would like to point out that I said 3-1 on the series preview.
Right.
So that is definitely on. Second, whilst we did describe this series as professional wrestling, we also said that there was a 5 to 10% chance that something wacky happened. And,
that's true.
And I would say that we did get that 5 to 10%.
I did say it was entirely possible
chance.
India could get skittled at some point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the scattergun approach got us there.
Yeah, you know, we just predict everything, and eventually we were right. Dan, let's go over to you for the first word on the game. What did you think about the match? Like, what stood out to you from the perspective of key narratives?
Yeah, okay, so full disclosure, first of all, is the fact that I actually didn't write off the chance of Australia test win either. Although I did lean towards the fact that Smith and Labuschagne would be the potential match winners for Australia, which is kind of, I mean, they made some useful contributions, but probably wasn't completely the case. Look, make no mistake, I think this is a fantastic victory for Australia. And also, I mean, like, yeah, let's kind of like batting second in India on a ranked turner is what would you give them? 10% chance of winning at the most, and these things do happen in professional sport. You know, this is what happens sometimes. Upsets occur. Does it make Australia any better than they were before the match? Possibly not. Does it make India any worse than they were before the match? Possibly. But as I said last time I was on the show, this Australia, the management group should be pretty thorough in their preparations. I would expect that from them, and I was pleased for them that they got themselves back in this with obviously an excellent win here. Nathan Lyon, outstanding. I think that's one of the big narratives, and the Kuhneman, who seems to have been plucked out of obscurity. Very successful in the first innings in particular. So, yeah, spin to win, it seems, chaps, right?
It does seem to be
yeah,
like
I
that.
guess
Yeah. I mean, I think there are sort of two really broad camps you can put yourself into on this test. First is the heroic angle, which is Australia from 2-0 down have come together to salvage something out of the tour. They've overcome what's a pretty significant skill gap between the two nations in these conditions. Their captain's gone home. They've had injuries. They picked the wrong team, and then they've ended up with like their fifth choice spinner starting in this match.
On the point of captaincy, I mean, maybe we'll get on to this in a bit, but could that be been a blessing in disguise?
Maybe. I mean, I'd still take Cummins over Stark, and I don't think the captaincy really had anything to do with it, to be honest.
You don't give Smith like a lot of credit for anything like that.
Nah, I wouldn't give him much. But we'll get onto that. That's a good talking point.
He put Cameron Green on the boundary and Umesh Yadav held out to him. That's a win.
Yeah. They also overcame
the tallest player at Cow Corner.
They also overcame, as you said, Max, the reverse Nigerian flag doctored pitch.
They did.
And it is what it is. I mean, India have tried to doctor the pitch, and it's backfired spectacularly.
When you have like visual evidence of a pitch that hasn't been treated the same across the whole length of the strip, that is categorically doctored. That's the very definition.
I think we can largely agree with that. And then they've got all these barriers, and they had Lyon is heroic. I think he's claimed the most wickets of any overseas player ever in Australia now, more than 50. Takes 8 for in an innings, in a crucial third innings. Uzi does enough with the bat to make sure they get a decent score. As you said, Dan, Marcus Kuhneman comes basically out of nowhere to turn into Jadeja on roids. Smith takes a wonder catch, which I think is definitely in the credit column for him.
That makes up for the 5 drops in the first 2.
And they're not massively maligned, but some people had questioned their 3 spinners approach. That I think comes off as well, as they've got. I think with this one, it might be a bit of a template for some other overseas teams. If you don't have one spinner that can bowl 3 different ways, or even 2 spinners that can bowl 3 different ways, just pick more and more spinners that can do different things. And as if the pitch is spinning 8 degrees in the first innings and shooting along the floor, a guy who bowls quite quickly and always nails the same point on the pitch is perfect. If it's a little bit easier to bat on in the second innings, a guy with 400 odd test wickets in Nathan Lyon, loads of experience all around the world, he comes into the game a little bit. And then you've got Todd Murphy doing picking
up the loose end,
Graham Swan light impression. To come into the game if there's a place for an off spinner. I think that kind of worked. And then to your point, Dan, it gives you sort of faith in the whole thing as a sporting contest when a team does come through against all that adversity, and you do have those individual achievements. It gives you a little bit of faith that it isn't, as I said on the last podcast, basically professional wrestling and kind of an exhibition in. How many crazy wickets can Jadeja get this week? It's a little bit, I think, as a neutral anyway, and definitely if you're an Australian fan, it's a little bit more entertaining, engaging as a product when this happens. That's, I think, camp 1. I've gone for the heroic angle. Was anyone put themselves, Stan, Max, in camp 1? Are these Aussie heroes?
I'd like to hear camp 2 first.
Camp 2,
before I pin my colours to the mast.
Camp 2 is entirely down to luck.
Okay.
Now, in the last 6 years, India have 4 sub 150 scores in India. They got one here, 2 in Pune when they lost to Australia last time, 1 in Ahmedabad last time. So there's a massive amount of luck in the just in the first place that their 9 quite competent batters have all failed, and most of them failed twice. Let's be honest, they didn't really come to the party in the second innings. Nobody could have seen Matt Kuhneman becoming Jadeja on roids. And in the second innings, he was back to being Matt Kuhneman. He wasn't. He didn't do this in both innings.
BBC couldn't even see Matt Kuhneman. They put a picture of Todd Murphy in their article.
They did. Yeah, they actually did. The guy he probably bowled the best he'll ever bowl. He nailed exactly the place on the pitch where he needed to nail the whole way through that first innings. obviously it takes skill. Like, these guys are great.
Yeah.
And as we said in the preview to this test, Max, you don't really understand how good these players are even to be on the plane to Australia. Like, it's perfectly plausible that he does just have his best day. And he did. But it is, there's an element of luck in that as well.
Yeah.
Second,
he was comparatively quite poor in the
even
in the third innings.
Even for recent bomb site pitches in India, this one took the cake. They had 8 degrees of spin in the first session. Like, that's preposterous. The ball that got Rohit span 8 degrees. Pujara had one that spanned 7.5 and bounced.
Also, in that Pujara over, the variation in bounce was between about 18 centimeters and 80 centimeters in 6 balls.
I was just about to say this. Like, the average ball in the first innings that Pujara was out to, pitches there, I think it goes through at 67 centimeters. The one that got him was at 40. It's a foot difference. That's a massive. That's a huge, even to a spinner, that's a massive variation. And it is basically freak circumstances. And the pitch did calm down a little bit. So India, they batted badly in a bad situation against a guy having an absolute day out. Those freak circumstances mean that realistically Australia's top end score, about 200, becomes extremely useful in the scenario. So you need that to happen. Then you need Australia to actually scrape together the 200, and they tried like hell not to do that. Like, it wasn't easy going. Basically, their second best player in the conditions really stood up and did get the runs. I think arguably that's not so much luck. I mean, I think Khawaja has played well in the series and has got a pretty good track record in Asian conditions. So you can give them that. Even after that, though, India get back into the game and have to throw it away in the third innings. Maybe not throw it away, but I think probably, what were they? They were 10 behind with 7 wickets in hand. If I was an Australian, I'd be thinking this is 50-50 right now. I think with Pujara and Shreyas Iyer going pretty well, it looked like they were going to be chasing 150 plus. And then Mitchell Starc comes in and Shreyas Iyer inexplicably hits a full toss. A half volley, straight to the man at mid-wicket. I saw there was an article, we talked about this actually on our last pod as well, about how England might have been a bit lucky in some of their Bazball games. I think that if we're going to look at an example of, and I'm maybe not fully in the luck camp, but I think if you want an example of how luck can go your way in a test match, I think there's a shit ton that happened here, basically, that went the way of Australia for them to actually pull this off. Fair play, though. They got across the line. They're the two camps. Let's say it's a scale. Where do you fall on the scale, Dan, of luck to heroism?
Yeah, I wouldn't quite call it luck. I would call it a part of the probability distribution for the match that could occur before the match started, if that makes sense. So, let's say for sake of argument, you assign India 90% chance of winning the match and Australia 10% chance of winning the match. Well, out of that 10% chance Australia are going to win the match, a certain percentage, probably quite a decent percentage of the 10%, will be a match which falls along this kind of path in terms of, as you say, India scoring kind of the exact amount Australia need for them to get a decent first innings lead, and then imploding from essentially when they were 25 for 4 in the second innings, which doesn't sound great, but it actually effective 25 for 4 with 2 set batters is on this pitch was possibly a recipe for success. So 150 lead or whatever, and Australia are going to be under immense pressure batting fourth on this pitch. So I mean, and you can say, they got 75 for 1 or whatever it was at the end, but it doesn't make 75 for 1 chasing 75 is not a problem. But there wouldn't be 75 for 1 if they're chasing 160, 170. They approach the chase completely differently. So what I'm trying to say is that before the match, there's all sorts of pathways that a match can go down, all of which have different probabilities. This was one. Does that mean it's luck? Yeah, there's going to be some factors attributed to that. Is it just a variance that's associated with high-level professional sport? Yeah, probably that too. So kind of a lot of factors, really. I think you could probably say a mixture of luck and kind of the winds aligning nicely, if you like, for this kind of outcome to happen. But you have to give good credit to Khawaja and Lyon and Kuhneman for actually doing what they're in the team to do.
Max, are you a luck or a hero?
I'm mostly luck. I'm sort of trying to liken it a little bit to a game of poker where Australia have been dealt like pocket nines and they've bet sort of surreptitiously, and then they've worked out that actually India have pulled a 7-2, but they're so confident they're going to try and bluff their way through the entire thing and fallen flat on their face. That's where I feel. I think there's Australia. I mean, they deserve a lot of credit because they were sort of a lot of, like you say, through luck or however you want to put it. A lot of things turned out in their favour in the sense that India rolled out where the first two pitches that they played on have been turning like quite a lot. They haven't been, outrageous. This was to the point where you've got a kind of almost a leveler in that someone like you say, Matt Kuderman, can turn up and bowl well and be unplayable. And when you do that against a team that has someone like Nathan Lyon in the third innings, who, like you said, is the most successful overseas spinner in India or bowler in India, you're opening yourself up for something that could go horribly wrong. And Australia took full advantage of that and played really well. And full credit to them for doing that.
Yeah. Do you think as well, Max, we might have gotten a little bit carried away with how bad Australia are?
Probably. I think. Well, the other thing, I think, Nathan Lyon wasn't really at his best in the first two games, was he? He was quite poor in the first test. Got better in the second test, but he hadn't performed to his best. Obviously, the batting had been a bit shambolic, and you could go back to the old 2017 argument of Australia have played their two warm-ups now. On their third test, they finally arrived in India and been able to play properly because they did come in a bit undercooked. I mean, they did a lot of prep at home, didn't they, and trying to work out spinning pitches, but it's never quite the same. And after a couple of tests, maybe they've finally sort of some of them have worked out how to go about things and just about got over the line. I mean, it's
maybe I think that will be a narrative that people take away is that if Australia had turned up and played 3 first-class matches, then
everyone's always looking for that.
But I don't know. I think the way things have come together here, it's clearly some talented players that have come off, but there's also an element of like, let's just see what happens, and I kind of appreciate where Australia have come from to end up in the why don't we just see what happens state of mind, because everything that they've tried sort of with a plan seems to have fallen apart, or seems to have not really worked. And now they kind of reverted back to, we'll just play 3 spinners and open with Travis Head, and hopefully he'll bash it around a little bit. And it sort of has worked, hasn't it? I don't. That very evidently was not the plan to begin the series. Like, they did not think in the third match we're going to be opening it with Travis Head and Matt Kuhneman's going to have flown in to like almost pick up a Man of the Match award. Like, that wasn't the script. The script was I think reverse swing with Stark and Cummins, tying him down at one end, and then it'll be Ashton Agar extending the batting and bowling left arm spin, with Lyon as the danger man and Cam Green filling in some overs. I think that was what they were going with, and Head wasn't in the team. Like they literally didn't pick him. So I think they have ended up in a situation where they managed to fluke this one to some extent against.
With that luck element you talk about, the Head clearly wasn't in their first 11 before the series started. Coming in for David Warner, who looks completely at sea at this level against this opposition. That's luck, right? That Warner got injured.
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah. There's some things have gone for them. The last thing I'd like to do on Australia is just go into the captaincy bit. Then we'll take a break and we'll go to Max talking about boxer shorts and India. Manscaped.com, 20% off with the code CricketPod. You mentioned Steve Smith, Dan, and we didn't stop to discuss that in detail. What do you mean about him? A bit of luck there, maybe, with him taking over and Cummins flying home.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not a huge buyer of most captains. So let me try and explain what I mean by that. So I have about the captains, about 90% of them are pretty neutral in terms of whether they're good or bad. I then have about 5% who I think are really good. You can put Peak Donny in that, for example, and such like. And then there's a 5% who are really bad and have no job being captain of a cricket team. I don't think Cummins or Smith are in either extreme bracket, but I do kind of. I don't really. By the same token, I don't really see Cummins as a tactical genius, and I think personally, I probably would. I'm not a massive fan of bowlers being captains in Test cricket either, because they don't tend to play every game. And I think that there's enough water under the bridge now for Smith to be given this job.
So I'd take, unless you're going to do something revolutionary and completely change how the team is going to play, then I don't really see whether that it makes any difference who the captain is. I probably wouldn't have Smith down as a tactical genius either, and I think
he's on the curve than
if you're.
I think the most important aspect is the leadership side of things and keeping everyone kind of positive when things are going badly. When you look at the way England sort of fell down when Root was captain, things drifted, right? You could see people sort of kicking their heels, and there was a little bit of a doom and gloom about things. And you need, I guess, a sort of relentless optimism or someone to cheer you up. And I think captaincy at Test cricket level is as much about keeping people up when the chips are down and trying to basically keep the intensity up as much as anything, as wacky plans and the rest of it. I think Steve Smith probably would be better than Pat Cummins in that situation. But I don't think that necessarily matters.
I agree with how you define captaincy in Test cricket, especially, and I think I've spoken about this. Most of the captaincy in Test cricket is taking off a bowler when they're tired and bringing on the other bowler. Like, it's not. It's.
I disagree with that. I completely disagree with that. I've got to say, yeah.
But but it is. It's. I think it's much more about workload management through a day's play than it is.
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay, well let's
Root being a prime example.
I think you can be bad at workload management, and he was, and I think that was his. He
was bad at a lot of things.
I mean, he was, and but I think the main thing you're there for, and I agree with Max. I think this is why Kohli was actually a very good Test captain. It's about making sure that your team sustain a level of intensity for 90 overs if you're in the field. I think that is the biggest thing you can do as a captain.
And put Jadeja in the right place.
But in Test cricket, you don't even really need to do that. As long as you've got people who can vaguely catch the ball in the slips, and actually, England have been are a winning machine at the moment, and they drop everything. Like, it's you don't even need people who can catch the ball in the slips. It seems. I think Cummins would be better than Smith, and I think Smith has actually shown that he will fail and has failed spectacularly in that role as somebody that has to G you up when you're down and keep you motivated and come up with ideas when things go wrong, because he did oversee a team that just cheated. I'm not one of those people who thinks he should have been banned. I don't really care that he's the captain again, but I do think it is poor captaincy to allow your team to flagrantly break the rules because you're under a little bit of pressure. That isn't good captaincy. Cummins hasn't done that, and I think particularly for some of these big three,
that would be pretty brazen for Cummins to bring out the sandpaper again.
I think if you're particularly if you're captaining one of the big three, a lot of the role is statesmanship as well. Like, you're picking up a lot of media stuff, and you're the face of the team, and I think Cummins is just better at that than Smith as well. In sum, I think if you look across the formats, I think you need somebody who is far more on it, tactically speaking, in the shorter the format gets. I think the longer it gets, it's more about motivation, more about big picture stuff, more about being a figurehead. Because the reality is, you can only bowl 6 overs of Mitchell Starc, 7 overs or 8 overs at a push, and then he needs a rest, and that's going to be how the rhythm of the day. The rhythm of the day is dictated by the endurance of your bowlers. Now, yeah, of course you can fuck it up and break Jofra Archer. Like it's perfectly possible to do that. But unless you're completely terrible at it, I don't think it's the maybe not. It might not be an easy job, but comparatively to T20 cricket and 50 over cricket, you have less of an impact in terms of your direct on field decisions.
Okay, I'm going to present a counter argument to that a little bit. Sorry.
No, that's right. Then we're going to take a break.
Debate is a positive thing, Dan.
Yeah. Friendly challenge. I actually think that red ball cricket, in terms of the analytics side of things, is very underserved and very underused. And I think that there's a lot of competitive advantages that can be gained in red ball cricket because basically the vast majority of people have a similar point of view, if that makes sense, to what the view that you've just kind of mentioned over the last few minutes. I'm not in that camp. I genuinely think that there's a lot of things that you can do tactically, and let's not forget as well that rightly or wrongly, the captain is a integral part of the selection dynamic for most teams as well, and some players are. I mean, personally speaking, there's not many players that I would value their opinion in terms of selection or recruitment. I'll tell you that right now. So look, they're involved with that decision as well. Now they're also involved in a lot of micro decisions as well. A lot of which we use Root as an example, and apologies to the guy, but these are real examples of I think poor captaincy. Is that over the last few years before McCullum, before Stokes, there was times when like England would play a team with like 7 right-handers at the top of the order, and then they would play dominant best. I mean, like that's just like cricket, like so obvious that that's like the first thing you should learn in terms of selection or deployment of your resources. Just don't do that.
Right, so I don't think this is a captaincy thing, though. I think this is like I agree on the point about analytics and red ball cricket because let's be honest, it probably isn't really where the money is. Like, there aren't that many red ball analytics jobs out there. There are 100%. quite a few. Well, there are more, and quite a few.
I imagine the data's a lot more complex to play with as well.
But like if you want to make your national team captain the selector, that's a national team management structure flaw. That isn't. 100%. That isn't.
It's also the case with a lot of teams.
Yeah, look, and it might be, and in those circumstances, I'm not sure it is with Australia. To be fair, in this example, in those situations, maybe you do want somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. But I mean, like strictly speaking, on-field captaincy. Like Smith, okay, that's all Smith has come in to do, right? He hasn't.
I've further gone with the Root thing from here. So, for example, over the last few years, when I looked at it of Root's tenure as captain, he bowled against left-handers a lot more than he let Best bowl against left-handers.
Fair enough.
That is a micro decision.
I'm fully in favour of that.
It's the captain's responsibility to give. The best matchup against left-handers, I should say. So he bowled more against left-handers than Best against left-handers, and so he's given himself the better matchup there, compared to a kid who is making his way in professional cricket still, and possibly was promoted to the team a little bit ahead of.
That would be my counter to it. He shouldn't have been in the team, and Root identified that and ended up bowling himself because he was a better bowler.
This is the thing. If you're a tactically astute captain, you wouldn't pick an off spinner to start with because you know that
you back yourself.
Yourself exactly. So there's these things, and the game that really sticks out to me as well is New Zealand. The game, I can't remember when it was. It must have been 2021. Was it? I remember. I think I was away at the 100 at the time. So it was a game when they just didn't chase. Yeah. Now, ultimately, that is a captain's decision a lot of the time. Now, can you really believe right now that with this current setup, let's say Silver was still coach, but Ben Stokes was captain, right? 100% that is getting chased. There's no doubt.
Yeah,
Ben Stokes would not.
Right, we're gonna have to
right.
take a break. We're gonna have to take a break because we are overrunning here and we've got to get ads in. But I think if we're using Root as an example of an average captain, we've gone a bit mad because I think we would all agree that he's one of the worst captains.
In the bottom 5% where he's terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're saying that the decisions that should be made should be simple for your average captain, and that does still leave space for someone to be bad as a test.
That is effectively what my argument would be.
But the decisions should be simple, and I think those decisions are simple, and they should be made by most captains. And I think that's where we're sort of saying like there's more of a difference basically in the complexity of the decisions that could be made in Test cricket to short form cricket. And
no, I think it's the other.
Wrong.
Yes, well, I think we're.
No, I said it the wrong way around, but yeah.
We're going to take a break and then we're going to come back because I want to talk about India and whether it's the end of an era.
You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cricket Podcast. We'll have to do a special show on captaincy, or I mean, I'm sure it will come up again at some point in the future. Max, you're going to have to get the copy up for Manscaped in a minute, but before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about India and what this loss might mean. So I think it's their third loss of the last decade at home. They lost one to Australia, Pune in 2017, and they lost to England, or Joe Root basically, in 2021. Bowled out really cheaply in the first innings here, Dan, for 109. The game plan for India, and I think it's sort of become more evident in recent years, is to rely really heavily on their spin bowlers outperforming the opposition spin bowlers, and assume that having 9 capable batters, maybe rather than 4 star batters, but 9 very capable batters, will mean that they have enough to grind out the 250 that they need in the first innings and to pick off or knock off the 150 that they'll need in the second innings. Does this game and the kind of manner of the dual collapses and maybe some of their recent stutters, particularly at the top of the order, does it give you any indication that maybe we are seeing the end of an era from the point of view of either this tactic or some of the players that they are using?
Well, firstly, from a tactic point of view, a strategy point of view, I mean, picking 9 competent batters and 2 of the best spinners in the world at home and 1 turners probably isn't the worst strategy in the world. If we're talking about bad strategy, that's not bad strategy. That's pretty solid thought process, I reckon. But I know what you're saying, and I think we kind of touched on it a little bit last time I was on the pod as well, about a lot of teams are coming to this juncture where they have to look at least evolution, if not revolution, and overhaul of their playing group, because they've got so many players who are all getting way past peak age all together at the same time. I think the example we used as a key example last time we used was New Zealand,
yeah,
who I think are in a really similar position as well. And I think that both New Zealand and India have been, you can say that they're guilty of being very reticent to jettison players who are past their sell-by date, and it's something that we've it's not the first time I mentioned it. It's very, very apparent in the IPL as well. When you've got players who are severely in decline and they're still going for 10 plus crore in an auction.
It's all CSK's fault.
Yeah. But yeah, it's if football was cricket, we'd still have Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney playing for England and stuff. Like this is just that's how it is, and it is wrong. Teams have got to be so much more proactive about anticipating decline of players, and ultimately be more willing to make ruthless decisions when the situation demands it.
The other option, of course, is that you go for the bionic approach of taking your best bowler and slowly replacing parts of his anatomy with bionic limbs, which I can only assume is what England have done with Jimmy Anderson.
Which reminds me of Trigger's broom on Only Fools and Horses.
Max, broadly speaking here with India, I think you can sort of look. There is. I wouldn't say it's evolution the same way as Dan's talking about, because I agree with that. I think that some of their players. I think it's weird that they're sort of carrying around Shubman Gill and Shreyas Iyer and not really using either of them in a. I mean, I think like they're at least as good as the players in the team, I would say, and to pick them and to play them in sort of odd positions and not really know where to bat them in the first place, I think it's a bit strange. But if we look at how India have gone about winning Test matches over the last, let's say, 7 years. About 7 years ago, we saw a lot of relatively true surfaces in India, and effectively what would happen is that Kohli's side would back themselves to outbat the opposition, and then with Bumrah, Shami and Ishant Sharma, out-bowl the opposition with seam-up quality bowling before tossing the ball over to Ashwin and Jadeja later in the match to finish them off, and that was extremely successful. They just ground teams into the dirt. I know you probably remember when England got 500 batting first and still lost like pretty comfortably. It was effectively that game plan. Then, as we've seen the decline of the batting unit, I think spins come more into the game, and obviously Ishant Sharma retiring, or maybe not retiring, but being shunted out of the front 11 reduces that seam battery. Injury questions about Bumrah now as well further reduces that seam battery. Where's the next evolution going to go? Like, I feel like we're kind of testing the limits of how much you can get a pitch to spin to help Ashwin and Jadeja, and maybe we saw in this test like the point at which it just becomes a complete leveler. Like if you've ever played 11-a-side football in England and you turn up and it's muddy as shit and the grass is like knee high.
You got 10% incline at one end.
Yeah, Barcelona have got if we were playing Barcelona here, it's going to come down to whoever wants it the most. Mate, what do you think?
I've never done it on a frozen pitch on Sunday morning at the local rec.
Exactly. What do you think we're going to see next from India, or do you think we'll just keep going down this spin route until Ashwin and Jadeja keel over?
It's a very interesting question. I think it depends on how much India overreact to losing this game. India overreacted to losing that game against England at Chennai when Joe Root scored a bunch of runs, because the next thing they did was churn everything up, and the sort of reverse has happened here in that everything is, the ball's spitting everywhere, and it's sort of allowed Australia's spinners to come into the game and close the skill gap. So it depends very much on how skillful their groundsmen are as well. I mean, you'd think the first two pitches are sort of the template that they're still going to follow, because that did kind of work. Ideally there was enough in it for the spinners, and that gave them the advantage, and that's where it went. But I think they just have to sit down and look at what's going to be coming through in this India side. I mean, how old is Ashwin now? What, 36?
36, yeah.
So I mean, he's not going to be around forever, and that is a huge pair of shoes to fill in terms of the skill that he's got.
He does have big feet in real life as well.
And and actual shoes, yeah. And who's going to be replacing him? Are we looking at someone like Washington Sundar? He's a good off spinner, but he's nowhere near the caliber. So you're going to have to, I think, look at trying to get back to the batting again, because I think that's where probably a lot of the talent's coming through. You've got Shubman Gill coming in, Shreyas Iyer, like you said, and maybe Pujara and Rohit are probably the two big ones that will end up retiring probably sooner rather than later. Maybe Virat Kohli as well. But I think there's a lot of batting in India that can come through. I think we haven't even spoken about some of the others who dominating the Ranji Trophy. Sarfaraz Khan, exactly, being a prime example. So there's
Rishabh Pant come back
playing
as
without
well.
Rishabh Pant as well, of course. Hopefully he can come back and be the level that he was before. So I think the batting is probably the way to. the way to go. Go back to that grinding teams down, and see what comes out of it, and ultimately they're all going to be better players of spin than overseas batters, bar the odd one. So when pitches start to deteriorate, I guess it's almost a more classical way you'd expect a game to go. In that, it is good for batting to start with, and it very quickly deteriorates because it's so hot and dry and becomes all about how well you play spin. And I think we might be ending up going in that direction because I can't see, particularly with the loss of Ashwin, how that's going to sort of correlate well with winning games.
Do you agree with that,
Boys,
Dan?
A question, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you the answers straight away. You've got to pick it. It's the nearest number, whole number. What is Virat Kohli's test average from the start of 2022 onwards? So the last sort of 14 months.
22.
Go on. So Max was 21?
I said 22. Jack said 21.
Max wins. It's 25.07. And that's facing almost 900 balls. So 16 innings, 15 dismissals, only one score above 50. And when your talisman, your superhero, you're the absolute marquee player in your team is underperforming to such an extent.
Is that partly because India are rolling out ridiculous pitches at home?
You say that, but Pant's averaging 62 in the same time period.
Okay.
Jadeja's averaging 54. Shreyas Iyer's averaging 42.
Right.
Pujara's 39. Rohit Sharma's 37. And even Akshar Patel's 36, and so is Vihari. So if you're looking at performances versus teammates, I would suggest that that's not...
Drop Virat Kohli. That's what I'm hearing.
And King Legend, I mean, Ross will be delighted to hear this. It's such a shame he's not on the show. He's averaging 15.91 in the same time period.
He's the big winner of this test match as well.
Yeah.
Right, lads, we are going to have to wrap up the show now. We've done our 40 minutes. Thanks very much for people tuning in. Tim, Yuveshanth, Akshay, Babu, Laura Lee. Been enjoying your chats as they have come through. If you want to support the show, sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/thecricketpod. And to play us out, Max, I'd like you to tell us about boxer shorts.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, you may have noticed in indoor it was quite hot. Got to about 34 degrees at times. And one of the things that happens when it's hot is that it can become quite uncomfortable in your boxer shorts. But don't worry, you've got the Boxers 2.0 from Manscaped to help you out, not only with their brand new and soon to be patented dual pouch. They have micromodal fabric, soft and breathable to keep your cucumber cool. Walk, run, strut, shimmy down the wicket and dispatch Nathan Lyon for 6 over cow corner. All things that you can do with these boxers on without breaking a sweat. So get yourself over to manscaped.com and use the code CricketPod for 20% off and free shipping.
Great. Thanks, Dan, for coming on. Hopefully catch you soon.
Let's see you guys again.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Goodbye.